Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Yalowitz, the director of the Dickey Center for International Understanding, and I'm delighted to welcome this very good-sized crowd to our first public lecture of the academic year 2007-2008. I was explaining to our guest speaker today, Deputy Foreign Minister Inuuteq Holm Olsen, that we never know, that we offer these wonderful speakers, but you never know what the attendance is going to be, particularly on a beautiful fall day. And what I can guarantee you is that you will not be sorry to be in here rather than outside. You're in for a very, very wonderful presentation. I had the opportunity to meet the Deputy Minister in Greenland just a few months ago and was delighted when he traveled to the United States to the UN General Assembly, from which he's just come, and was able to visit us at Dartmouth today. I would just mention one other thing before I turn the floor over to Professor Darrell Press, who will formally introduce our speaker. But today's program is the beginning of what we think is a rather innovative year-long program sponsored by the Dickey Center, along with the Dickey Center's Institute of Arctic Studies and also the Dickey Center's War and Peace program. But what we're doing is a series of public events to this fall, two in the winter term, and probably one or perhaps two in the spring term, devoted to the subject of climate change and the implications for international or national security. This is a subject that is beginning to appear on radar screens in a variety of ways, and we think that this combined effort by three parts or two parts of the Dickey Center under the umbrella of the Dickey Center will be a very, very good way for us to focus on what is a key emerging issue. I'd now like to ask Professor Darrell Press to come to the lectern. Darrell is professor in the government department, specialist in international relations, but he also has taken over the reins very recently from Professor Al Stam as the director of the Dickey Center's War and Peace program, and we are delighted to have him with us in that respect. So Darrell, let me turn to you.
Thank you, Ken, and let me just be the first to welcome to Dartmouth, at least today, the Deputy Foreign Minister, Inuuteq Holm Olsen. It's really a great pleasure to have you here today. Mr. Olsen has already had a rather distinguished career and has held a variety of important positions, both in Greenland's government and in the Danish government. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Alaska, a master's degree in international affairs from George Washington University, and he served in a wide range of positions in the Danish Foreign Ministry in Copenhagen, in Greenland's mission to the EU in Brussels, and now he's Greenland's Deputy Foreign Minister. Mr. Olsen is going to talk to us about global warming, specifically about Greenland's experience with climate change and how Greenland is confronting the challenges of global warming at home, in conjunction with other countries, and in conjunction with international institutions. So please join me in welcoming Deputy Foreign Minister Inuuteq Holm Olsen.
This is a part of the process that where Greenland and Dartmouth College will forge closer links together.
I don't think your mic's on.
Okay. I have to put one of these modern. Is it on? It's green. What? Can you hear me all? Okay. Okay, it's better now. But I've been invited here today to talk about Greenland and climate change seen in an international perspective. Greenland is in many ways has become the symbol of climate change because of the melting of the inland ice cap. And you see a flock, of foreign leaders coming to Greenland these years. I mean, we have had the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. We have had the President of the EU Commission, Manuel Barroso. We have had the Speaker of the House, the US Speaker of the House. We have had Barbara Boxer. We have had John McCain. I mean, this is all within a year, you know, that come to Greenland. And they especially come to Inuuteq, which I'm gonna, if you can find it, I'll give you a prize later. Inuuteq is in the northern part of Greenland. It's a very special place because it's one of the areas where the ice from the Greenland ice cap is flowing into the sea. And the reason why they're coming there is that you can witness, you know, the change of the climate with your own eyes. And it's very dramatic what's going on there because the flow of the ice is estimated to be 15 kilometers a year, and that is up from 5 kilometers a year just 10 years ago. So you're really witnessing, you know, what the climate change is doing to Greenland and its environment, and it has also other effects because Greenland is a nation or country that relies heavily on its natural resources. We are a country that's based on fishing. I mean, our main export is fisheries products. And we have also, you know, several thousand years of tradition of hunting, where we have about 2,000 people who rely on hunting. And they usually rely on, during the winter, to go out on the frozen ocean to the edge of the ice to be able to catch animals. But in the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, the northern part of Greenland, has not frozen. I mean, the ocean doesn't freeze anymore, so it creates a huge problem for those 2,000 people that relies on, you know, on the ability to go out and to hunt. And even the numbers of hunters have declined. I mean, over the years. It's estimated that, you know, in 10 years ago there were about 8,000 people who relied on hunting and fishing, but today the number is 2,000. So you see a shift, you know, in the way people live, and it also affects our fisheries because a small change in the ocean will also affect, you know, the fish. I mean, we rely heavily on shrimp fisheries for our exports, but if the ocean temperature rises just a few degrees, it will mean that the shrimp, you know, will disappear and the cod will come in. I mean, we experienced that in the 1980s, where there was the shift actually. For whatever reasons, I mean, the ocean temperature in the 80s changed, and I mean, the cod disappeared and the shrimp came, and that cost a fortune to change, you know, the mode of production in the trawlers, in our fish factories. So it's going to affect us, or it is already affecting us heavily, but it's going to also affect the rest of the world because of the, you know, the increased melting of the ice will, I mean, create a higher level of the oceans. So that, I mean, there's a lot of focus on Greenland, not only scientifically, but also, I mean, due to the fact that it's going to affect the society in a very big way. But the changes are not only negative. We should also look constructively at change in general, as it can bring along new opportunities that can benefit our people. We are witnessing a longer growing season that is benefiting the southern region of Greenland, where agricultural production has started commercially, which was something we could not do just a few years back. I mean, the production of potatoes, for example, has grown exponentially. And for the first time this year, I mean, we're able to buy broccoli salads in our supermarkets, which is something that we never seen before. So that's one of the few positive effects that we can witness. But we also have enormous potentials when it comes to developing hydropower. These years we are investing heavily in hydropower in different places in Greenland for supply of electricity and heating. And this is a clean and renewable energy source that is provided in even greater amounts because of the melting of the ice cap. But we are not only looking at investing in hydropower for our own population, but also in order to become economically more self-sufficient by providing hydropower to energy-intensive industries like an aluminum smelter that Alcoa is researching into constructing these years. It's going to be an aluminum smelter based on hydroelectric power because an aluminum smelter needs a lot of electricity, and that we are looking into together with Alcoa in the area between Nuuk and Sisimiut in the Midwest of Greenland. But it's also a way, developing our hydropower is also a way to combat the emissions of greenhouse gases because Greenland has signed on to the Kyoto Protocol where we are obligated to cut our rates by 8% a year. Right now, a lot of the communities are relying on diesel power, electricity based on diesel production. Greenland is undergoing exciting and promising developments politically as well as economically. We are right now negotiating with Denmark on how to increase our already extensive autonomy. These negotiations are in the final stages and look promising to develop our country and preparing it for independence one day. But it is evident that we need to develop our economy if we are to achieve independence one day. And developing our economy to become more self-sufficient from the block grant received each year from Denmark, which amounts to about $600 million a year, and which is about $10,000 per person in Greenland, should take into consideration the very limited share of emissions we emit each year, because we emit around 300,000 tons of greenhouse gases a year. But if we are to develop our economy, it will mean that we're going to raise the emissions that we have. But 300,000 tons of CO2 emissions each year should be also compared to the 25 million tons of CO2 emissions that are emitted, around the globe. We are focusing our focus on changing to cleaner ways of production and improving the way we things to do. But we don't want it to be a punishment to develop our economy because it's this internal relationship we have with Denmark. Denmark also has an interest to in Greenland developing its economy, so we don't have to rely on the block grant that we receive from Denmark each year. But that's an issue of mitigation, of reducing greenhouse gases. But what the biggest challenge that we are facing is adaptation, because the people, as I said, we are relying on what nature and the environment and what that can give us. Living off the ocean, the fish, the seals, whales, and other mammals is the backbone of the Inuit culture and will always be, no matter what, no matter how much we develop. Living with and off the nature and environment will always be who we are and what we identify ourselves by. The change in climate up there means that oceans have become warmer, sea ice is disappearing, animals are changing behavior, and weather patterns changing. It means that we have to learn and adapt to the new environment we live under. We have to understand exactly and the effects of the changes we experience. We have to be able to foresee the changes, and this is where researchers come in. We are not only interested, though, in researchers going to the ice cap, but also researchers that are looking at the socio-economic and human dimensions climate change will have as an effect. But climate change has foreign and security policy implications. Climate change is increasing the availability of natural resources, and transportation issue is also become a central emerging issue through the Northwest Passage. There are estimates suggesting that 1/4 of the world's oil and gas reserves lies in the Arctic. The potential new transport route through the region will reduce cost and time considerably, because the Northwest Passage is the shortest time of the route between Asia and the east coast of the US, as well as Asia and between Europe. But it also increased the risk of environmental catastrophes in the region. The rapid melting of the ice cover and its impact on the world climates, new navigation routes and exploitation of natural resources, the vulnerability of ecosystems, as well as mapping of the outer limits of the continental shelves under the law of the Seas Convention. That's some of the issues that we are facing or will be facing in the near future. The Northwest Passage is is an issue of conflicts, especially between the US and Canada on the status of the passage. Canada believes that the passage is located within its internal waters and therefore has the exclusive rights to decide which ships may or may not enter the passage. The US, on the other hand, believes it is an international strait and therefore any nation have access to sail through. That disappeared. To sail through the passage. But the case of shipping here presents a need for international cooperation and coordination to tackle the issue of protection of environment and resources. Common rules that address the issue of construction standards for ships, navigating those dangerous waters, assisting vessels to navigate the waters, including ice forecast and rescue operations. Should there be any fees, to sail through the area like there is in other areas in the world? Rules on the protection of environment, the integrity of the Inuit communities across the Arctic should also be addressed. Which kind of liabilities, should be required in case of spills and other environmental degradations and cleanup procedures, because you are dealing with an ecosystem that's very fragile when it's affected. But for Greenland, it's especially the case that the ships will sail up through along the west coast. That's one of our main areas, but also because of the potential effects it will have on the marine ecosystems, and also especially the environmental issue, in case of spills. But also, if you're going to have large super tankers sailing through, it presents, a real challenge. But there's also another issue. That's the so-called quest for the North Pole, as some of the press headlines likes to call it. If you have witnessed, or if you have read, newspapers in the last few weeks, you will see that, Russia planted a Russian flag on the bottom of the ocean on the North Pole. That's another emerging issue, and this stems from the law of the Seas Convention that gives states right to claim the continental shelf beyond the 200 sea miles. You can claim an area up to 350 sea miles of the continental shelf if you can document that the shelf beyond the 200 sea miles is connected geologically with the shelf that you have on the coast. And that's where you have the issue, of the North Pole. Who does that belong to? Countries have 10 years after ratification of the UNCLOS, the United Nations Law of the Seas Convention, to submit their claims. If it can be documented that the outer continental shelf is a natural extension of the shelf within 200 sea miles. It gives a state the right to exploit the natural resources that lies on the seabed. And that means especially the oil and gas reserves that potentially lies there. But it's not dependent on effective or formal occupation or any declaration that the country does. So, planting a flag on the bottom of North Pole, it's a political show-off. We don't consider it to have any effect. If the UN Continental Shelf Commission recognizes an extension beyond 200 sea miles, and other states have their claims accepted as well, which overlap yours, then it is a question of negotiations to determine the limits with other states. If none of the states can document scientifically that they have a natural extension beyond 200 sea miles, the continental shelf then becomes part of the common heritage of mankind. In light of these developments, Greenland and Denmark have invited the foreign ministers of the 5 Arctic countries that borders up to the North Pole to a conference end of May 2008 in Inuuteq. And the focus and goal of the conference is to determine that the overarching goal is sustainable development of the area with consideration of economic, environmental interest, and to fully involve the stakeholders living in these areas. That the challenges in the Arctic should be solved through dialogue, cooperation, and negotiation. That existing applicable law shall be the foundation to determine the delimitation of the continental shelves, and that there is a special need to strengthen increased scientific cooperation. We hope that this initiative will mark the foundation for increased dialogue, cooperation, and a path toward negotiations, as these emerging issues needs to be solved in a multilateral fashion. The reactions from the invited countries have so far been positive, and I'll be glad to come back here later in the future to tell you about what kind of results have been achieved. And with that, I'd like to open the floor for dialogue, because I think that's the best way to answer whatever questions and whatever issues that you like to raise. But thank you so far.
Keeping with our tradition, I'd like to, when we get to questions now, to give priority to our students. And I neglected to mention to any of the 2011s who are here, welcome to Dartmouth and welcome to our series of public lectures from the Dickey Center. So any student, please raise your hand and be recognized. Who'll be first? Always has to be one. Good. Why don't you stand up so everyone can hear you too?
George Neptune, I'm actually a 10, but my question was, I was wondering if the climate changes that Greenland is experiencing right now is having any effect on traditionally sacred or spiritual lands in the country.
Well, on land, we have it's not so much on the sacred and traditional lands, because in Greenland we don't have private property. That's a notion that doesn't exist. Land is common for everybody. And since we are an autonomous region, it's our government that controls, whatever development that we have. But I can tell you, on land, we have possible effects on the part of the country that's covered by permafrost. If the permafrost melts, it's going to have an effect on mostly on the towns and for example, runways that we have. It's going to destabilize the roads, and if construction is on a permafrost land, then it's going to basically destroy it. That's but Greenland is very rocky. Can will confirm. So, I mean, if you have construction on rock, I mean, it doesn't matter so much.
Please, just stand up, yeah, so that we can hear.
Hey, I'm Sebastian, I'm 11. I'm wondering what kind of pressure, if any, Greenland is putting on countries like China and the United States to sign the Kyoto Protocol.
Well, we have, I mean, since we are part of the Kingdom of Denmark, it's the Danish government who's, you know, who does all the negotiations, but I mean, in large part together with us. But the Danish government is hosting the COP15 meeting in 2009, the Conference of Parties, in Copenhagen in 2009. That's the event that's going to lead to the replacement of the Kyoto Protocol. So I know that's, I mean, that's busy lobbying, you know, by Denmark to I mean, in many countries, not only China and India, but also in the in the U.S. I know the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, after she visited Greenland, and I mean, she went to India and China right away, also to push, you know, for China to sign on. So there is I think you can say that there is a large lobby, especially by the European Union, who are quite ambitious in reducing the CO2 emissions to involve the countries, you know, that have not signed on to the Kyoto, especially the big, you know, countries, big nations.
I have a question. I'm interested in how Inuit communities adapt to climate change, and my question is twofold. First of all, do the communities in Western and Eastern Northern Greenland experience impacts of climate change differently? Are the impacts very different in nature? And if that should be the case, how do you, within Greenland, shape policies that take care of the specific local situations, but also correspond with like the larger scale negotiations that you're doing? Do you have some kind of a structure set up within your country?
Well, I mean, for those communities that are, you know, for example, way up north or in the east, they usually rely on hunting. They're usually very isolated. What they're experiencing, I mean, I don't think there's any big difference in what they from different regions to regions, because they are seeing, I mean, changing weather patterns. You know, also the disappearance of ice, and it's a real challenge because up there, I mean, you don't have a lot of other economic opportunities. So basically, what we have to do is to, show how there's no question that the only way to react to the changing climate is to adapt. I mean, we should be the masters of adaptation, because I mean, living in one of the harshest environments for 4,000 years, you know, we have been able historically to adapt and follow, for example, the animals. And I mean, in the past we used to live very in a nomadic fashion, but that has changed now because people are, you know, located in one place. I mean, have settled, you know. They have their houses. I mean, they have to pay mortgages. They have to pay electricity bills. I mean, so it's a very good question on how to address it. But I mean, but we are tackling it. We are setting up policies on how to adapt. But it's only, I mean, beginning now. But one of the ways that we are addressing the changes in the economy, for example, we are shifting, from fisheries to the mineral exploitation, and where we are, trying to educate those who want to be educated in the minerals, sector, because we are going to change our economies. I mean, fisheries is will become less important, also because of the mode of production is changing. I mean, you rely so much on machines and robots and less on human hands. So that's going to be. I mean, we are looking at developing both our mineral sector, but also on tourism, for example, which is growing rapidly these years.
I know in other parts of, or in Alaska and Canada, there are other areas in the culture that may perhaps be stronger than in Greenland, dancing. So are there efforts being made in Greenland to strengthen other parts of Greenlandic culture as the citizens' culture is weighing on climate change?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in Canada and Alaska, they have preserved, some of their old traditions, but we are less fortunate, so to speak, because we've been Christianized several centuries ago, and they have banned, drum dancing and other form of expression of the culture. But you still have, especially up if you look at the Qaanaaq and the East Coast, were quite isolated, where you still have some of the preserved culture intact. But still, I mean, you have seen, and for example, in emergence in the West to learn about drum dancing and taking up kayaking. I mean, it's important to preserve old traditions, but also not to forget that we live in a modern age. It's combining those two that you have to find a key, I think. I mean, Japan. If you go to Japan, I mean, I'm very envious of the Japanese because they've been able to, keep the old tradition and still live in a, very modern way. And that's, I think, is a key. But I mean, we are. I think, but compared to Alaska and Canada, we have preserved our language. I mean, much better because we have. I mean, it's a language like other languages, like English, and Danish is used. But we are aware that we have to preserve the old cultures, but still adapt to the new age that we live in.
You mentioned that agriculture has become more viable in recent years, while hunting has become less viable. In accordance, have you seen a population density really increasing in agricultural areas and quickly decreasing in the areas where people tend to hunt more in kind of preparation for maybe future increase in agriculture?
Not so much, actually, because, I mean, in the southern part, the most southern part, you're looking at, in the area of Qaqortoq, Narsaq, and Inuuteq. That's where all the agriculture is based, and that's based on sheep farming. It's very difficult to develop the land because it's something that usually goes from generation to generation. Where you see a general trend moving from small villages into larger towns. But you also see in some of the small communities or small villages an increase. It's very locally, it's a question of locality, because there's some areas that are witnessing, for example, a boom in fisheries. So it's a question of economy, where you're seeing a decrease or increase. But we haven't witnessed a surge towards the south to develop agriculture, because setting up an agricultural production by newcomers is quite difficult. I think what we will see is increased development of agriculture, but by those who are already there.
Ken Yalowitz mentioned that you had worked in
By the way,
process.
this is Marianne Stenbeck from
McGill University, who was a Dickey visiting fellow last year. Glad to see
That's right, and a friend of Inuuteq. I hope. Inuuteq, you worked in Brussels.
Yeah.
I presume with the EU and the fisheries negotiations and so on. Now that the fisheries are kind of diminishing,
Yeah.
is there any movement afoot in Greenland to try to rejoin the EU? And for people who don't know, I mean, Greenland used to be a member and then you withdrew. Do you want to rejoin? Is there any feeling about that?
Yeah. Before I answer, I mean, I should just, say that Greenland is the only country that has left the EU. But that was because we got home rule in '79, and at that time we were members through Denmark, and we wanted to develop our fisheries industry, and Brussels said, you can come after we given quotas to Germans, to the Brits and to the Danes. So we didn't want to have that, so we left it. But we still have very important relations, formal relations with the European Union. It's an important partner, and we have a partnership agreement and a fisheries agreement that we have now. But like every 5 years, there's some politician that will address the issue. Shouldn't we become a member again? Isn't it better? EU can pay for all new infrastructure developments, and save us from all our troubles. But there's no, in the public, there's no discussion on I mean, it doesn't catch on. I think the relations that we have are quite satisfactory to most Greenlanders, and also to the government in general. So there's, I mean, there is a wish to maintain good relations with the EU, but there's no wish to rejoin the EU.
Would you comment, please, from a historical perspective, what the Greenland ice cores are really showing regarding the rates of climate change recently as opposed to the past?
What they are showing I mean, the studies in the Greenland ice cap.
I understand they go back some 500,000 years.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious at the relative rates of climate change seen over time. I mean, how much more has it increased in the last 150
Well, that's a very good question, but I'm not going to be able to answer it because I'm not an expert on the ice core drillings. I know that they go back, I think, several 100,000 years, and they show, different differences in climates. I mean, we can talk about the Norse and the disappearance from Greenland, as part of maybe a climatic change. But I'm not going to. Sorry, but I can't answer, the rate historically. That's.
Are you going to answer? Please.
I think you mentioned in your talk that when the Northwest Passage opens up, there will be a big increase in shipping up and down the west coast of Greenland. So I'm wondering what the cities in Greenland and what the government is doing to prepare for this. Is there more building going on in the cities? There will be commercial opportunities, I imagine, for ships stopping there. And I would imagine there would be some kind of increase in tourism in Greenland also. I'm wondering what preparations are being made.
Well, for the tourism part, I mean, we are witnessing a huge increase in, for example, cruise ships that are coming to Greenland. The way we are, I mean, we are not preparing for the opening of the Northwest Passage right now. What we are preparing for is, our own economic development, but that also includes, bigger harbors where, where they are needed. Because I think we would like to see some kind of international, if not agreement, but understanding among the countries that are going to be affected before we open up the shipping of the Northwest Passage. with regard to common standards for the ships that are going to be allowed to sail through, for environmental cooperation, and how to, procedures and how to do in case of an oil spill, for example, by one of these tankers. Right now, it's more of a, intellectual discussion. We are not preparing by building much larger harbors, for example, along the west coast. But it's one of the issues that are emerging. It's a very recent issue, so to speak. The issue is not new. For centuries, people have speculated on how to navigate the Northwest Passage, but it's just now with the climatic changes that it becomes a serious issue, and that's one of the issues that we would like to tackle in the conference, of the foreign ministers in May next year.
In asserting rights for the North Pole and potential mineral rights in the North, is Greenland doing that on its own, or is it being handled through Denmark?
It's handled through Denmark. It's Denmark that still has the power, so to speak, in upholding sovereignty, but also in foreign affairs.
So your economy, is there any target date for Greenland's economy?
No, it's a process. It's a long-term process. We have had home rule for 30 years, and now we are, finalizing the negotiations with Denmark on increasing that autonomy, but still within the constitution of Denmark. But the goal after that is independence. But that's not that hasn't been set a specific year, because that's going to depend on our economic ability, but also on. I think we're going to wait until we have a much better populated population, a much better educated population. So it's it's down the road, but when it's going to take place, it's a very good question.
An observation. I'm not a student here. This is nothing personal. Right now, global warming's front headlines. Our former Vice President Gore made a movie about it. You talk about the economics. You're more concerned about the economics. There are approximately several 100,000 sites on the computer that talk about global warming. And Greenland, if you will, is our canary in the coal mine, and you made the front page of National Geographic. I don't think it's a question of if Greenland is going to melt, but when it's going to melt. According to studies now, the North and South Pole will be melted by, was 2050 and now it's 2040. Greenland will be gone long before then. Greenland alone will raise sea levels about 16 feet. The other two will take it up 60 feet. So you can tackle this, it's more of a comment. Pretty much Greenland coastline will pretty much be gone, as will the state of Florida where I used to live. We have to do more than talk about it, study it. Get excited about oil discoveries or Northwest Passage. We're going to be living on a whole new planet, and we don't really seem to care.
That's a very central issue that you are raising about reducing the CO2 emissions, because to really reduce them, you really have to make some painful decisions. Or the industrialized nations have to raise some serious. I'm not so much. No, have you been to Greenland?
No.
Okay. If you come to Greenland, then you will see we have lots of. It's very mountainous, and very high. Some of them are very high, so I'm not so worried about the coast. I think some of it is going to remain, but what if all the ice disappears? The inland ice, then there might be new land is going to emerge. But it's a real serious issue that you are raising, about, if the rate of the climate change is going to, take pace, and how to reduce, how to, counter attack that one. And I mean, I just came from, the UN General Assembly, which was preceded by a summit on climate change, in New York. I mean, everybody agrees, that we can't keep talking about this, that we have to act, but action is difficult. It's always difficult.
If I could just ask a follow-on question to that. You mentioned this five-nation foreign ministers conference next year, but given the gravity of the situation that we just heard about and you have described, my question is, are the existing international organizations that deal with the Arctic, like the Arctic Council, flexible enough and strong enough, to deal with these issues? Is a five-nation meeting of foreign ministers going to be enough, or do we have to look at new architecture?
I don't know if we have to look at new architecture, but it's a start. I think you should see it as a start, especially by the 5 countries that vote us up to the North Pole. The existing structures, like the Arctic, you mentioned the Arctic Council, don't have that kind of mandate. They're not strong enough. They can raise the issue. They have raised the issue of the climate change, that the Arctic is going to be more severely affected by the changes in the climate, than other regions. But the only existing body you have, is UNFCCC. And the only existing agreement you have is the Kyoto Protocol. And that's a challenge of international cooperation, is to, having all these 192 countries agree on a specified limits on, for example, reducing emissions. And that always, it takes many years, to reach any kind of agreement. And I wish if I had, an answer, then I think I'll be sitting somewhere else and not in Greenland.
Unfortunately, it may take a number of catastrophic events.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Who had a hand up? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I had a two-part question. My name is Sarah Pankinier, and it also has to do with where the change is going to come from. So I was wondering if you could comment on the atmosphere, the public opinion among young adults in Greenland, for instance, how they relate to climate change and the urgency for action, and also what sort of educational initiatives exist for the youngest generation in Greenland, and also I'd be curious if you know in Scandinavia or more widely as well.
Greenland has, when you mention Scandinavia, we've always been closely linked to Scandinavia, and the good thing about Scandinavia is that they have, a high profile on in environmental consideration and environmental profile. So young people are very much aware of the changes that are taking place, and they're also very much aware, what it is that needs to be done. And there's continuous campaigns, that tells us, how you can save on electricity, and how you can save on water, and how to save on your heating bill. But it's a process of education. Of educative campaigns that has to be has to be raised. Are done. And Greenland and Scandinavian countries are usually, have usually a pretty good record in terms of in protecting the environment. So I think the issue lies, especially in developing countries like China. I mean, you have China and India and some of the big countries that are emerging where you really have some serious challenges in terms of combating both pollution, but also, I mean, the rising emissions of CO2. I think that's, I mean, those, you have to look at those parts of the world to, really address the serious challenges.
If I may follow up, it sounds like Greenland is in a unique position also in terms of education and communicating with the world and in these sorts of educational initiatives, as you mentioned, the canary and the gold mine, as an opportunity then to communicate what is happening in order to institute that change. So.
Yeah, but we also only 56,000, so it's unfortunately we're limited in our capacities, both in terms of number of persons and financially, But we are, I mean, we're doing our part, to tell the rest of the world about the changes that we are experiencing. But I think we have to rely on, our partners, especially, for example, Denmark, but also other countries that we cooperate on to, spread the word. But
the Al Gore film was mentioned. Thank you. And certainly those of us who are not scientists are very impressed by it. But there have been some scientists who questioned some of the ways that he made his points. And so I really have two questions. One is, did he go to Greenland? Is Greenland shown in the film? I can't remember myself. And generally, in Greenland, is there sort of an opinion about this film? Is it respected, or is it questioned, or a little of both?
I'm not sure whether he went to Greenland. I haven't heard. But I know he's been invited to Greenland to come, I think, next year to give a speech. And the other question about, how the people are perceiving that, it's not something new, what we saw in this movie, because I think some of the graphs and images that he showed, we already knew when the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment report came out in 2004, which is a comprehensive document that was presented to the Arctic Council. So, I mean, there's nothing, he didn't say anything new,
What's my understanding, actually, in some ways Greenland may benefit a little bit from global warming, but what's the prediction in Greenland as to, over the next 10 to 20 years, how much the melt from Greenland will raise the water levels around it, which will affect countries like the Netherlands, Bangladesh, and the United States, which will be the real global impact from Greenland, not so much up there, but around the rest of the world. What is the level that Greenland's melt is going to raise the water over the next 20 years?
I think I see a number in the foreseeable future that the rate of melting is going to raise the water levels by, I think, 17 centimeters, which is how much is that in inches? I can't remember.
Over what period of time?
Yeah, I don't remember the specific period of time, but that's, I mean, if the rate is going to continue in the next maybe 20 years, I think. I'm not exactly sure. So, but if all of the ice, in Greenland is in the Greenland ice cap melts, then it's going to raise water levels by 7 meters. But I mean, you have, there are some different predictions on, when, if this is going to continue, that how fast it's going to take. But at the thickest point of the inland ice, Greenland ice cap. It's 3 kilometers thick, which is we use a metric system, so sometimes I have a difficult time converting. Yeah, almost 2 miles thick. So it's going to take, I mean, a while, you know, for it to completely melt. But I mean, what we're seeing is an increase of the flow of coming out, you know, because you have several outlets all along Greenland where all the inland ice cap, you know, the pressure from the middle is going out. And you see that in the speed of that increasing.
Well, if there's a damming effect somewhere in there, isn't there, where it's supposed to accelerate even more?
Yeah, I mean, and you see that's also, I mean, scientists are also seeing that, you know, when the top melts, you know, it creates lakes, and that goes down, you know, to the bottom and creates it becomes like a lubricant, you know, for the rest. So you see some movements of ice as well.
The ice cap,
Would you just answer?
yeah, sure. The ice cap that exists on Greenland, as I understand it, preserves this unique climatological record for the entire globe for the past several 100,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if this melts over the next 30, 40 years, that record will be destroyed. I guess the question I want to ask is, what is Greenland doing about, or the world doing, about preserving that climatological record so that it doesn't disappear, regardless of how we're going to live it, it's going to help?
Well, we're not really doing anything, but we're allowing scientists to come and drill. Because there's been several drillings in the middle of the ice cap, you know, to go all the way to the bottom and to collect, you know, pipes, you know, of ice and studying the pipes. Those pipes of ice. And there's also a new, I know there's a new drilling that's going to take place in a different part of the ice cap. But Denmark is doing a lot in terms of that, in cooperation with other countries, and including the United States, because, I mean, it's a unique history that you can see in terms of the climatic conditions the world has had in the period, you know, where you have had this ice. So I know there are, you know, there are a lot of, you know, ice core drilling of ice somewhere in a laboratory, but I think it's a continuous process where they drill in different places, because at the last time they didn't succeed in getting to the bottom. I mean, there was some kind of a mistake, so they're trying elsewhere. So there are things. I mean, there are researchers looking into that.
In fact, I heard that one drill had gone down about 2 miles and found a Russian flag.
There's a new core that's being planned and will start during the International Polar Year, which is this next year or two till 2009. And it's an international cooperation. It's called the Neem Core. It will be drilled in north central Greenland, and the goal, the ice is deep enough there and old enough that the goal is to look at climate history during the last warm period. We're in a warm period now, then there was a glacial period, and the period before that was warm. And that's the best chance to look at how the climate behaved in the transition from a warm period to a cold period. So it's a big transition that is very similar to the kind of climate we're in now. And that's a very important core that is starting to be drilled. The drilling starts actually this coming year.
This is someone who knows, Mary Elder from Krell. Polar ice scientist in this world. Thanks, Mary. Anybody else? I will. You mentioned at the outset, Inuuteq, that you hope that the relationship between Greenland and Dartmouth would grow, and that is certainly, you know, our intention and our desire, because what you're experiencing in so many ways is something that really is a portent, for a lot of places, in the future. And we very much want to work with you, to study it, but also to see, what you can do about it, before it's too late.
Yeah.
But as a small token from the Dickey Center, I would just like to present this to you with our thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. First, yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you very much, and also, many thanks to Ken and to all of you for showing up. I would love to come back here at some later stage and tell you more about, what's going on, and whether we ice free or not, and whether we're still here there or not. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm a very conspicuous.